Well, hello folks, and welcome to episode 213 of Retro Power and Cut. And we're here in the fabrication shop, and the booth has just stopped running, so the noise levels have dropped a little bit, which is good. I can shout a bit less bellowing required from a Nat. We're going to start with Aston DBS, and Matt's working away behind me, salvaging the aluminium panel work as much as we can. Because for various reasons we can't yet progress on the main chassis, body, tub, whatever you'd like to call it, we're making some headway where we can on the aluminium panels and trying to work out what we need to salvage and what we may need to replace. And the front wings are the sort of major first port of call, really. The far side, Matt's pretty much got as salvaged as it can be for the moment. So he's moved on to working on this side. He's left it all assembled at the moment. I think we may have mentioned that last week. He's left it all assembled at the minute just because it's holding it all together a bit easier to work on with it in one piece. We are going to section it up. We are going to split it back down to the individual panels on the original factory weld lines. But at the moment, he's finding it easier to work on like that, just all screwed together and screwed down to this bit of wood on the table. It's just a nice working height. So the main problem this side, this wing, for some fairly unexplained reason, we don't really know why, been chopped in half and then very badly welded back together. It's just there actually, very badly welded back together. So Matt's done quite a lot of panel beating on that and then cut the weld back out, and you cut it out and re-welded it, hadn't you, the weld line? Did you re-weld that line? Yeah. He's cut through the sort of bad weld line, beat it all flat, cut through it, and then re-tigged it properly, put a decent weld down it. He's just got to chase. We've got a bit of a step in this wheel arch here, so this needs re-chasing here. But other than that, the shape's pretty much back to being right now. And then the other work that's already been done the far side is he's putting a new back edge on the wing now. He's just scribing out for that. So he's made a new back edge, and then he'll make a new bottom edge here where this is all corroded. Make a new bottom edge for that with a new bead put into it, which he's already done the other side. And then TIG weld all those in, the panel beat all that flat. At that point, the wings are pretty much salvaged. There's quite a lot more panel beating on that lower section, but there's no point addressing any of that until those sections are welded in, because obviously that's all going to need beating anyway, so it'll be a case of doing all that in one go. So that's good. There's a lot of salvage operation going on there. So if we can salvage both the wings, that's a significant cost saving to the customer, which is a good thing. And it's just quite nice to be able to use. Quite often we end up with projects where we can't use any of the original car. There's several projects around at the moment where we're using almost nothing of the original car. It's quite nice to be able to use a bit of the original car. The scuttle will certainly go again. There's no problem there. This front panel is not so clever at all. And to that end, I actually visited a business just down the road near Northampton at Irchester yesterday, ASR, and went to see them primarily to pick up these, which are there's two of these, which are the roof reinforcers that go across the top of the roof. These were cut out when that car had a Webasto sunroof fitted. These had been chopped off, so we needed some new ones. Now they're relatively simple to make, but we don't know what the dimensions are for them, and there was nothing left of the ones on the car. So I went to see ASR about those, because they make those and supply those from stock. We had those in stock, and they make, very usefully, ASR make almost everything for a DBS twin headlight or a DBS V8 or the later V8s. They make nearly all of the parts for those. They also restore quite a lot of Aston Martins. They had a couple of restorations underway when I was down there. Really good place, really good guys, and really useful from a parts supply point of view. So that was the other bit. We picked up a pair of the outer sills, because although we're going to be making a new chassis in this car, we still want to keep the original outer sill sections. So while I was there, picked a pair of those up, which again they have in stock. Very nicely made as well. Pardon me. I've finally succumbed to the cold that's doing the rounds, so you'll just have to bear with me a bit if I keep clearing my throat. The other reason for going down was this front panel. The line across the front of that is wrong. It's got damage during the crash damage, and it's not been straightened correctly. So that, ideally, we need a new panel, and we don't know what line that should be. We haven't got a jig to tell us what line that should be. We can work from the bonnet at the back edge, but the front's a bit of a guess, and it does need to fit the grille correctly. So I went to see ASR because they could make that part, and it was quite funny really. I had a conversation where I said, oh, do you have a jig for making that bit? And Sean said, yes, behind you. So I looked round, and sure enough, there behind me is a jig, and it's the whole front end for one of these. I said, well, that looks a fairly serious jig. And he said, well, yeah, it should be. It's the one the cars were made on. Which you're not going to get more accurate than the one that the car was originally put together on. So it's the jig that originally this whole front section like this would have been checked on, and any final tweaking done on. So he has that. So he's going to make us a new front section for this. Then we can graft that in when we put all this lot back together on the car, and that will solve the problem of that panel being damaged. They can also do us a new valance. However, I need to talk to Cal because I think there's a plan to change the valance area very slightly. So we might not be able to use their standard one. So that's still up in the air at the moment. But that's pretty much where we're at on that. In the background on the car, we're still just doing the final distilling down of the running gear choices, and I'm awaiting some information at the moment, some CAD information that I need to be able to piece together the chassis. But the plan is to do our own chassis without a perimeter frame chassis to replicate within reasonable similarity the original Aston Martin setup. However, we'll be using an independent front end, or we're using much more modern components, or assuming I can get all the information I need, it will be using Corvette C7 front uprights and aluminium wishbones and brakes, etc. And at the rear, using Corvette C7 rear uprights, and aluminium wishbones and brakes, etc. So all Corvette C7 in terms of suspension, and a chassis built to pick up that Corvette C7 setup. And then I'll leave the engine choices sort of floating around, but bear in mind what I've just said in terms of the suspension parts. That might give you a flavour of the general plan in terms of the engine, but we're not going to reveal that one just yet. So that's where we're at on the Aston. Really, the next stage on the body tub is to get it blasted, which will be a job for Mark. Mark's been pretty busy one way or another with stuff on the body shop front, so he hasn't had a chance to get onto blasting. Hopefully next week we'll get onto blasting that. But I'm going to hand over to Mark in a bit to let him take you through all the body shop side of things. In the meantime, we'll move on to what Bobby's working on, which is Sab Wasabi. And Bobby's working on getting the structures tied together, basically getting the Saab and the Audi to meet at the back. So he's been finishing the panel work on the rear inner arch tubs and getting that finalised, and then starting templating, checking all the final alignments, and then doing some various cutting out to get clearance, and then starting on the templating of the inner structure that will tie the Saab inner quarter structure, if you like, to the Audi arch tubs and inner sill structures. However, there's a point within all that where we need to resolve some issues in this area here, basically, where the inner B pillar meets the inner sill, and the door shut lines also meet the sill structure and the new revised sill structure, which is going to be quite a lot wider than the original Saab structure, because the body's changing shape quite a lot down here. The quarters, just to revise for those not familiar with the project, these quarter panels will be removed, and the car will have carbon fibre quarters which are considerably wider. The outside of the car is somewhere sort of out here following the modification. So Bobby's just trying to work out a plan for how to do the structure in that area to allow us to fit a sealing system in for the door. And I was looking this morning, and I have to say I've not had the clearest head today. I'm suffering a bit with this cold. My brain is struggling to think very clearly. So I've kind of left Bobby to it, because I think he's far more capable than I am today of thinking up a solution on anything like that. To be honest, I think he'd be far more capable most days, but he's definitely far more capable today. So Bobby's currently working on one of the doors right next to us now. He's stripped one of the doors down, taken all the insides out of it, and he's now just going through all of in fact I think he's just stripping the second door down, actually looking at it now. But he's gone through all of the doors to analyse the structure at the bottom of the door, basically, so we can work out how we're going to revise it here. Because the original doors on a Saab are quite strange. They come right underneath, and there is no sort of outer sill structure to speak of. The sill sort of finishes at the vertical seal, what would be the normal seal flange on the pinch weld seam, but there isn't a door seal on that. There's no inner seal there. The door comes round, and the seal actually functions onto an outer part of the underneath of the sill. and it's a bit of a strange arrangement, and we don't want to carry that on because we want to have a wider sill which also carries the sill trim like a carbon fibre box that forms the side skirt of the vehicle. So we're changing the door shut line and changing the door shut position, and we're going to refabricate the lower part of the inner structure of the door so we can move that seal. But Bobby's just trying to get a plan in place for where to put that seal line and how to incorporate it into the new door shut and how to make that work with the Audi sill structure. It would have been handy if the Audi sill structure centre line was slightly further inboard, but in reality it won't make that much difference to the final sort of fabrication. It's just working out the order of events and making sure we don't make anything more difficult further down the line by decisions we make now, because we're not going to draw all of the detail of this area in CAD. It's just not worth the CAD time to do when we're only building one of them. We will just improvise that area, if you like. It won't be a particularly technical job to do. It's just making the decisions so that we don't create a problem when we come to fit other further panels later on, with getting decisions made in the wrong places. More will become obvious on that in the next couple of weeks as that develops. As I say, it's hard to explain at the moment until all the bits are in place. So it's hard enough to think about, let alone explain to somebody else. So that's where we're at on Wasabi. Moving on to V12E Type. Tom he's run away to get a cup of tea, I think, but he's working on finalising the inner arch structures, and to that end there's a closing panel that closes off the inner vertical face of the rear wheel arch, and then there's a little closing panel that finishes off the main tub, if you like, which I've suggested doing as a separate piece just because it's a slightly more complicated shape. And we figured it would be better to try and do the main part of the tub and then do the extension piece at the back, which needs to be shaped to try and get rid of dirt and prevent dirt build-up, as a separate piece. And to that end, I've got some bits handy here now, some handy props which Tom is making, which is that's the closing panel that closes off the inside of the wheel arch, which is just a vertical piece. I think it goes that way around actually. That's just a vertical piece, and then this is the beginnings of the closing panel that finishes off the inner arch tub, which basically sort of sits like that on that, and that will basically have a nice slope round there, just so that the dirt that builds up where the rear of the arch lip is there, the dirt that builds up on there will tend to just wash back off and drop to the ground instead of stacking up in a sort of return at the back of the arch tub. So that's what Tom's working on. He's getting all that welded into place, but the inner arch tubs are very close to done now, so that's all coming together well. Once they're done, the next stage, moving on from that, will be the reinforcers for the boot floor, to get that done, and then the spare wheel carrier and the battery carrier, which have got to go into the boot, and the top hat there'll be some profiled top hat sections which act as the reinforcers inside the boot floor. They still need to be made as well, so that's all working quite nicely. Other progress on this I'll leave to Cal to talk about, because it's CAD related, the other progress on that front. So that's where we're at on the E-Type. And then moving on from that, we'll come around here, we'll come and see Stu. And Stu's been busy on a couple of fronts. He has been working on the XJC. He's done a little bit more on the heater cowling, the piece of the bulkhead, but he's then moved on back to getting his hand back in on a bit of exhaust work, because Stu's only breaks really from panel beating over his many years of work have been a couple of stints at an exhaust company not too far from here actually, and so we tend to lean on Stu every now and again for a bit of exhaust stuff as well, just because I think it gives you a bit of a break, doesn't it, as well? It's a bit of a break from trying to make complicated bits of sheet metal fit bulkheads and things, which Stu's life seems to revolve around accommodating HVAC units quite a lot. So I think he's quite enjoying something a little bit different, and he's quite enjoying making these heat shields at the minute. These are the exhaust downpipes and manifolds for the Allegros, and we've elected to use the original Integra downpipes and manifolds. Although there's a little bit of pitting corrosion on them, they are actually fundamentally stainless steel, although it's obviously quite a low grade of stainless that has corroded a bit. And we're getting these ceramic coated anyway to try and keep the heat away from the air conditioning condenser. So we're getting them ceramic anyway, so actually blasting them and then ceramic coating them, none of that's going to be obvious at all. And we're changing the outlet to a new spherical. The original ball joint fittings were damaged, but we've just put new ball joint fittings on. We've done that with stainless steel MIG welds, so it kind of is consistent with all the MIG on the rest of the downpipe, and then the system will be TIG welded from there on. So Stu's been doing the final parts of the exhaust systems, which I think they'll probably cover next door, but then he's also moved on to doing some heat shields which bolt onto the manifolds. We use this material which I've now forgotten the source of, which, considering I sourced it, I can't actually remember who it's come from now. It's an American manufacturer. Can you remember? I've forgotten who makes this stuff now. Yeah, I can't remember. It's a sandwich type heat shielding material. So it's a double layer which is open core. It's like air in the core. It's quite good insulating material. It's quite good at reflecting the heat back as well. And he's got to put a hole in these for the dipstick, because that goes down through the middle of the heat shield. So he's just come up with a neat little way of hemming the hole by pressing an aluminium ring into it, and then he's hemming the rest of the heat shield. In fact, he's literally just doing that one now, which is probably a bit of pressure on camera trying to get it on, but he's basically folded an aluminium hemming piece from 1.5mm aluminium sheet, which will then close over the edge of this, shape to it, and then close over the edge, which is what he's just working on now. So it has a nice closed hem, no sharp edges all the way around it. We've tried folding this stuff before, putting a double fold on. You might remember from Interceptor episodes before, but it didn't work so well, so we ended up aluminium hemming it, which looked a lot neater. So that's what Stu's on with at the moment, making the heat shields for those manifolds, and also getting the exhaust system finished, which I think is on one of the systems is now ready for final welds. It's all tacked up, ready for final welds. I think the other system is about to move on to now to get have you done the second one? Are you on you're about to start the second one? Ah, yes, of course, yes. We've got all the, basically we used an off-the-shelf spoon centre section from a DC2 Integra, which I think I've touched on before. I moved one of the mountings on to allow for the wheelbase change, and that all fits really nicely then. Bear in mind, recapping for those who haven't heard that before, obviously the Allegros are on DC2 Integra floor pans, but they're shortened by 130mm, so the DC2 spoon exhaust system fits, but the forward mount is 130mm too far forward. So I've moved that 130mm back, and then that system fits, and it means that the system starts 130mm forward of where it should at the front. That's a good thing, because there was a catalytic converter there which we're not fitting, so that takes 130mm out of the distance occupied by that. And what we've actually done is put another silencer in there, because the silencer that we can put at the back of the car is quite pitifully small, so we put an extra silencer at the front. And Stu's been working on the additions to that system that work around that centre sort of spoon exhaust system, but we're waiting. We've got all the parts to add on to for the second car, but we haven't actually got the middle bit, the spoon bit, so that's the bit we're waiting for him to carry on with that. So in the meantime, yeah, heat shields, getting those done, making sure the downpipes and manifolds are ready, and then he'll be back on to enclosing an HVAC system in an XJC again. I think at that point I'm going to wrap up on all this, and I'm going to hand over to Mark, because they're beavering away in the body shop right behind Jamie as I speak, beavering away on an Interceptor. So I'm going to hand to Mark and let him talk about that for a bit.
Hello viewers. All right, I promised you last week the Cosy is painted. You see footage of it in the booth now. Jamie will do a little montage while I'm talking away, so I can go like this and you can't see me. So yeah, this is all painted. I jumped on, painted the bumpers, whale tail, grille, mirrors, all the little side trim clips what go in the arches and stuff. What else was there? Yeah, the front and rear bumpers. So now I've got the arches, I'm getting ready now on the stands to do all 4 arches, side skirts, and what's the other thing I've got? Oh yeah, the bonnet vents. So I'll get them prepped today, ready for Monday, and hopefully that should be this complete, because the bonnet's painted, the doors are painted, boot lid's painted. So this is almost done, so I reckon after Monday then we can start polishing it then, and then it'll be off to the customer for a nice Christmas present. So if we go this way, we won't walk all the way through, we're cut back. All right, back in the body shop, that quick. All right, so yeah, boot lid, 2 doors are here, they're done, like I said, next door. Let's go over to this, the Jensen. I think Tuesday, was it Tuesday or Wednesday? I got this into polyester in the morning. Another 5 coats this is the Max Mayer 3300 polyester. Pretty impressive stuff, to be honest. It's a bit more harder than the stuff we usually use, so it's nicer to do your crisp lines and stuff like that. But yeah, so Gaz at the minute, I think he's soldering away 80 grit Then go down, we're guide coat the top, again, because we're doing the whole top first. So we keep this line. So then we'll go on to 120 after we've guide coated it. Then we'll go down to 180 after guide coating it again. And then what we'll do, we'll swap the tape over to the top of the car and do the whole process again. He's also done the roof. That's done 80 grit. Do like what I said before, all that again. So yeah, it's been a busy week, COSWORTH being painted. This is soldering on. So hopefully next week, we'll be at the end of this polyester, hopefully, but I'm not promising. We'll see. Not like Nat would say, oh, we'll get this in paint next week. Ain't gonna happen. But yeah, so that's it for this week. See you next time.
Well, thank you, Mark, and that's covered the body shop nicely, and I think we've covered everything in here. What I will say is something else happened this week which was quite exciting on the Scimitar project, but we're not going to reveal it this week just because Jamie's editing workload has got quite high, because you'll have probably noticed that we've also just put out a video with me and Reese from Total Fabrication Solutions and my Class 7 Autograss car, which has also occupied a bit of Jamie's editing time. So we're going to do a recap on the Scimitar project next week and cover a little visit we did to a supplier of a key component for that project. But at this point, I'm going to hand over to Cal and let him show you around the assembly shop. Thank you very much, Nat. I'm going to start by showing you this awesome new Retro Power hoodie. If you watch to the end of the video, I'm going to show you the rest of the new merch we have down in the den. We've tried to get this available in time for Christmas. There will be a link in the description below to our web shop so you can go and buy that. But if you stay to the end, I can show you the rest of what's available. Anyway, moving on to cars. Carrying on with some general assembly on this. So we've now got the slam panel in holding the condenser and radiator, which we'd done on the other car last week. And then we've been moving on to a little area we needed to come up with a solution for, which we've got a very nice one actually. On the sort of scraper seal area on the doors on these, the original stainless steel moulding there didn't fit particularly well. It kind of was bent a bit at the ends where it had to bump out around the door frame. And because our door skins are thicker, because they're carbon, that sort of channel section of stainless steel wasn't a very comfortable fit over there. And to be honest, it also wanted to be black in this case, because it carries on the line from the black seal around the rear window, and it looks a bit at odds. If you look at the base model Allegros, that's how they are. You have a black seal around the rear window and then kind of just this one bit of stainless moulding on the top of the door, which doesn't really follow on from anything else. And I didn't really want to coat the stainless steel with paint that might scrape off, so we were trying to come up with something aluminium that could be anodised. And looked at BMW E30, which also hook over a little channel. There's like a metal clip that half of it sits on the inside and holds the rubber scraper seal, and half of it sits on the outside and holds an anodised black moulding. And to our amazement, they're an absolutely perfect fit. The moulding sits absolutely nicely on there. There's a small cut section of it on there, and the rubber sits perfectly. In fact, the standard two-door rubber is also exactly the right length. So we are just going to get some E30 aluminium mouldings, modify the back very slightly, and that will solve our problem. So that's going to be the scraper seals going in. The rear windows pretty much ready to go in. I couldn't get brand new gaskets for those, but I did manage to get this generic profile, which sits really nicely in there. I'm going to do now what I do every week and stop shouting. Well, I've gone from bellowing over the heater because it was on, and now I'll be really quiet again, but I'll try and be bellowing still. Windscreens have arrived as well. They're in reception from Euroglass, so we've got the new windscreens ready to go in. The new windscreen seals are ready. Back windows are ready to go in. To be honest, if we just need to paint the door frames black and sort out these E30 mouldings, and then we can completely glaze these now. Both headlinings are in, so that's an option for both of these cars now. I'm going to take a little walk in this direction, mainly because I'm talking about the exhaust on this one. I think last week we showed Stu just in the early stages. We've now done the modifications we needed to do on the manifolds for these, changing the flange on the rear to mate up with the next section that we fabricated. And then Stu's made those really pretty heat shields, which I think Nat showed you earlier, which means we can take the manifold off this one now. The other manifold's also been modified, ready to go, so the two manifolds can go away to be coated at Zerkatech, ceramic coated. So with the combination of the ceramic coating and the heat shield Stu's made, we're pretty confident in terms of managing the heat around here, because that was something we were worried about, is that because the Allegro is so much shorter at the front than an Integra, you end up with a much tighter clearance between any cooler pack stuff here and the exhaust manifold. Now, as it is, the radiator's off to this side, but it's very close to the aircon condenser, and obviously we want to try and keep as much heat away from that as possible. So that is where we're at with these. Alex has been carrying on with the wiring, so he's been doing the air conditioning harness for it, or air conditioning and heater unit harness. So previously we showed him doing the engine ECU to bulkhead harness. It's a sort of modular harness, there's various sections to it, but one of the next ones is the HVAC harness. So that's basically the one that goes to the control panel on the dash, the actual HVAC unit itself, and then ties into the PDM loom. I know one of the things that's quite nifty worth mentioning is on the fan speed control, a way with when you're running PDM based electrics that you can effectively create more inputs or be more efficient with the number of inputs that you're using, is that you can multiplex, as they call it, those inputs. So you can use a single input, but if you feed it a different amount of voltage, you can then program the PDM to do different things according to what voltage it's seeing at that pin. So in the instance of our HVAC loom on this, we've got the fan speed control, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then one of those settings will feed the battery voltage straight to the input pin on the PDM. Then if you click it to the next one, it feeds that signal via one of 3 little resistors we've made on a little circuit board that Alex has designed and had made. And so it feeds a slightly lower voltage to the input pin on the PDM. Next setting feeds it through another resistor. Essentially, so each of the settings on the fan control feed the same input on the PDM, but with a different voltage. And then you program the PDM to change the fan speed accordingly. And if you cast your minds back to probably a month or so ago, when we were doing some pulse width modulation testing on the blower fan, we're then using the single output on the PDM to do the blower fan, but controlling the speed through pulse width modulation. So basically, all of the switch settings, all 4 of the switch settings and the speed outputs are just being done by one input and one output on the PDM through use of a little resistor pack on the switched input, and through controlling the fan speed via pulse width modulation, as opposed to have separate outputs going through different resistances for the actual speed control of the fan. So yeah, very cool way of controlling multiple settings with a single input on the PDM. So that's where we're at those. Let's have a little wander along here. This we will show you in a minute when we go down to the den what Richard's been up to on the interior on that. But I'm going to dwell briefly on Churchill. In a minute I'll hand over to Luke so he can tell you what he's been up to on this. But you'll notice there's a seat in here, which will be the seat you saw Richard lovingly upholstering a month or so ago. We wanted to get that in the car to check some of the clearances. Because Luke's been on with the design work of the door card, I wanted to make sure there was enough space, A, that it obviously doesn't clash with the seat, but also sit in the seat, and make sure there wasn't going to be too much of an intrusion into your shoulder area. And there's a few other bits we've assembled just for checking clearances. So we've got these quarter light frames in, because when this quarter light is opened, part of the frame actually sits in board, and we want to make sure the top of the door card clears that, and obviously any other provision for how the door card comes up and sits at the top here. So we're just getting things bolted into the car that dictate anything to do with the door cards at the minute, because that is what Luke has been on with, and I shall show you now what he's been up to.
Right, okay. Hi guys, welcome back to the CAD Lounge. I say lounge because of our abundance of space now, it's great. This has been a very Jag heavy week, both with the release of the TWR Jaguar, if people have seen that, Jaguar's interesting rebrand to say the least, and my work on Churchill, which is a proper Jaguar. I ended last week's video basically saying I'd scanned the car to get the door cards ready for manufacture. A month or so ago now, I sent off the renders to the client for this, and he was really happy with them. So it's now that process of making those nice, pretty renders into actual feasible parts that we can put on the car. A really fun process, one that I always find very educational because every car's a little bit different. Every car has different features that you have to work around, and this is no exception to that. But we are very, very close now to a final part that can be first prototyped and then tested. So yeah, hopefully by the end of this week, or by the end of today really, I can show this to Cal and he signs off on it. Thanks guys.
Thank you very much, Luke. And I'll also briefly mention what George has been on with. So I think we showed last week he was on the early stages of modelling the airboxes for the V12 engine, and he's basically been carrying on with that process, getting all the detail in there, working out how it's all going to be mounted, how you access the bolts. It's actually quite complicated, and this is often applies to design work on a lot of components on the cars. When you start thinking about the level of detail of how you're going to access the bolts, what it needs to clear, you know, the order of assembly of things, it can get more and more complicated. But it's looking really good. So there's going to be a threaded flange that's actually bonded into those carbon airboxes, so that the bolts can go in from the throttle body side, so there aren't bolts inaccessible inside the airbox itself. And then, well, I say the throttle body side, it's actually the engine intake side, because the throttle body is now on the inlet to the airbox. And then there's a separate machined back plate, if you like, that will go onto the end of the 6 runners each side. Those bolts will go on from effectively the airbox side with lock washers under them so they can't come loose, as they kind of would in a normal filter back plate type arrangement. And then you put the airbox on, and the bolts that go into the threaded ring within the airbox go in from the sort of intake port side. And then we've done a large threaded spigot for basically a balancer pipe that will balance the airflow between the two sides, essentially so you don't get a difference in manifold pressure between the two manifolds. That will be teed off to the vacuum for the servo, but also we'll have the manifold pressure sensor on that sort of T between the two sides. So yeah, it's kind of just going through the motions of getting that design in place. We've now been just starting to look at the air conditioning heater arrangement. We've got a rough plan. We know how we're going to do the air direction control. We just wanted to look at where we're going to have the evaporator and where we're going to have the condenser, and how we're going to control the airflow between the two at this stage, to make sure where we're positioning the engine air intake filters doesn't take up space that we then later wish we had for doing that. But it's all looking like it'll work out really nicely, and I think it's a nice setup we're going to have with the fly-by-wire throttles, one each side. I think George probably mentioned last week we were getting a little bit nervous about the sheer volume of linkages, and with some of the experience we've now gained with fly-by-wire, that stack up of play and the linkages can cause you quite a lot of problems when you're dealing with idle control, because you kind of the motor is constantly moving one way and going, oh, nothing's happening, and then I need to move more, and then suddenly it gets loads more movement than it thinks and goes back the other way, and it's difficult to control that kind of fluctuation up and down. It's hard enough in normal circumstances, but when you add a load of movement in between the motor and the actual throttle bodies themselves, it gets even harder. So that's why we're going down that route, and on that note, I'm going to go down the den and show you what's going on down there. Welcome back to the den, and it's very Jaguar based at the moment. In fact, it's safe to say the whole car world seems very Jaguar based at the minute. Not only my social media feed, I don't know about yours, over the last couple of days has pretty much entirely been either about Jaguar or about TWR. Which is great, actually, and I have to say it would be quite cool if we did maybe a podcast about the Jaguar reset, as I suppose they're probably calling it. Although it'd be interesting to hear your opinions if you want to stick a comment below. At the moment, I'm reserving judgment. I'm kind of impressed with the fact that there is a massive buzz now, or a lot of chat, shall we say, about Jaguar. I think if they follow it up with a really good product, it'll actually have been a good thing. Whether they do or not, it all hinges on the product ultimately. Right, okay, so it looks like there's been some sort of car-based explosion around me here, and this is all relating to the FType, which is on the ramp there, which I think I previously called an F-Pace. FType, I think, was one of the best cars Jag has done for a long while. It really created desire across a very broad age range, which I think is the thing they've been struggling with for a while. But anyway, customer with this one, it's a really, really good example, very low mileage. The things that were letting it down are basically underneath, so the subframe that's down here, probably out of shot, which is a little bit crusty here and there, just because, you know, most OEM manufacturers, the surface finishing processes they use on things like subframes are generally done to a cost and not necessarily designed to last forever. So we're going through basically redoing surface finishing processes on components to try and improve the longevity of those parts. So we've already got here a replacement subframe going on, which has been blasted, zinc metal sprayed and powder coated. And then we've got replacements for a lot of the bushes, ball joints, etc. Aluminium castings are going to be stripped and coated, which we'll go into when we've actually done it, but with a protective coating to try and keep that surface corrosion you get on aluminium castings at bay. Fasteners, a lot of them are being replaced with new, but we're also in turn refinishing those with different surface finishing processes. In fact, we've got some baskets being organised down here into Xylan coating, zinc nickel plating, which is one of the better coatings in terms of corrosion resistance. It's like a slightly grey blue finish, which looks very much like the OEM finish, but we can make sure when we get them done that their plating thickness is a little bit better than they would have originally been. So yeah, basically making that thing look stunning underneath and hopefully lasting longer in terms of the resistance to corrosion on those finishes. So that's that, and then of course the other Jag in the room at the minute, this X308 XJR, which is pretty much ready to be handed over. Went through all the road testing on it, everything good. Did note that the brakes could have probably done with replacement discs. They were getting a bit of a lip on there, so we've done discs and pads at the same time. It's also had a nice detailing session now, so it's looking pretty at its best. The interior has come up absolutely stunning on it. Often the case with sort of light beigey creamy leathers, they look tired often just because they're dirty, and if you spend a lot of time actually scrubbing them up, they come up really nicely. So interior's looking great on this. We're just going to do a little bit of design work up at Retro Power actually to do a 3D printed surround to put a modern CarPlay unit into the sort of shaped area of the console where the original radio is. And then I think that's going to be the last job for this. And talking of last jobs, actually, if I sort of, I don't know, I don't really need to stand in front of this car to say this, but the 2002 is pretty much ready to be handed over as well. In fact, I think that might be going this weekend. We finally got through all of the electrical gremlins on it. The last remaining one was there was an issue with the indicate flash dip stalk. This one threw me into a wiring pit of despair for a bit because I could not get my head around how the wiring was done for the headlights on it. And it's actually, people probably will now post up saying, oh, that's really common, but I've never seen it before. So the main beam switch just literally switches on the main beam or off the main beam. It doesn't switch between dip and main. It's not like a changeover, it's just an on-off. And I was trying to work out how that turned the dip beam off. And it turns out that the relay for the dip beam is grounded through the headlight bulb filament, through the main beam bulb filament, such that when you turn the main beam on, it then has voltage to both sides of the coil on the relay and it turns the dip beam off. However, given that we'd changed this to LED bulbs, that was no longer functioning. So I put an additional relay in on this, so it actually switches over and turns off the dip beam when you turn the main beam on. But yeah, the last pain in the backside was that the indicate switch was a bit iffy, so when you indicated it had a tendency to flicker the main beam on and off. That's been replaced with a good used one which Nick sourced, and yeah, I think that's ready to go now. And then we have an exciting lineup of things arriving here. The formula we've been talking about, essentially getting cars on board for us to generally look after them, do the ongoing maintenance of them, keep them looking amazing, keep them functioning well. So off the top of my head, some of the stuff we've got arriving, we've got a W124 Mercedes that Rich is also doing an interior on. We've got, I think, a Mercedes 500 SEC. We've got an E30 M3 Evo, E46 M3 CSL. We've got a Fiat Dino that we're bringing in for a modernisation project as well, which is going to have complete interior in it. It's going to have modern sort of suspension on it, brake upgrade, fuel injection. We've just, I think, booked a R32 Skyline GTR. So yeah, these are the sorts of things that we're super excited by. So if you've got something you want us to look after, take the hassle out of ownership, then yeah, just give us an email.
info@thedenautomotive.co.uk. And that leaves me standing in front of this absolute weapon, which is Nat's autograss car. We just dropped on, I think, Thursday, a few days ago, first episode of Smoking Grass with Nat, which is going to be a series following the continuation of the build and then hopefully the competition in this Class 7 autograss car, which is, as you can see, a mini pickup with a 500 plus horsepower Chevy LS3 in the back of it, which does make it somewhat lively, I would imagine. Nat was telling me the other day also that it's got something like 70, I think there's only 70 kilos of weight on the front end, on each, maybe it's each corner of the front. I think overall weight's only 500 and something kilos, so it's basically 1,000 horsepower per tonne, so bit of a beast. Right, shall we have a little wander upstairs? And I'm going to hand over to Richard to see what he's been up to this week. Before I do that, I'll just mention that we are, of course, taking on interior projects for anyone, not just Retro Power customers. So this Capri interior he's been working on, for example, although that customer happens to be a customer we built a car for at Retro Power some years ago, we are taking on interior work for anyone, including other businesses. So if you're a car restorer or a resto mod company, for instance, get in touch and we can talk about your interior upholstery needs. Here's Richard.
How's it, everybody? Good to be back. Welcome back. Yeah, so this week I'm back in the den a little bit. You saw me last week. I did the 2 Allegros. That was quite nice. Did one, figured everything out, and then I was able to just fly through the other one. So they both look identical. Really chuffed with those. Also, we test fitted the parcel shelf. I know Cal tested on that. I'm not going to go into that because I don't want to spoil it too much. There was a lot of dry fitting going on, so that we're ready when we close. So there's still some electrical work that needs to be done before we can, you know, finalize it and put little cuts and nicks in for everything to go fit in properly. But it is looking really, really nice. So we can't wait to get there. In the meantime, I've been busy with, or back on the Camaro, so which is really cool. You'll see Jamie's got some cool shots of me doing finally putting the billet strips on the door cards. That's been quite a while now. When you look at the door card also on the bench, it looks like a really busy door card because you've got Alcantara, brown leather, black leather, and then the billet bits, and then also the armrest, which is going to be like a two-tone, you know, either 2 different blacks or a brown and a black. We'll decide when we get there. Anyway, so I've fitted the doors in there. They look absolutely stunning. I'm now just waiting for Anthony to get a gap, and then what we're going to do is, because I've put them on, we need to now just check the windows. So we need to run those windows up and down. There's a bit of adjustment that we can do to push the weather strips closer so it hugs the window better, so that there's no rattles, and also we need to see that the door card is not you know, rubbing against the window to scratch it or to make it, you know, work hard to go up and down. So once that's done, we'll be fitting the new billet locking pins, the new handles, the window winders that Anthony fitted. We got some nice billet ones, so then Jamie will get some shots, and we're moving closer to that being ready. You'll also see there's some kick panels ready, so we'll be fitting the speakers to them, and then as soon as Mark has painted the one of the dashboard pieces in the front, we'll be able to put the center console back in with those nicely machined billet bits. But one thing that's then still outstanding was the gear gaiter, but I can't do it unless that thing is 100% in its place, because one thing with the gear gaiter is it needs to be perfect. You don't want it too big, you don't want it too small. Too big, it looks puffy and baggy and it's just all over the show. Nobody likes that. Too small usually interferes with the travel of the gear stick, and then it starts pulling out at the corners and this and that, and we don't want that. So we'll get that done hopefully in the next week or two, and then we'll show you that. So that's been parked for the minute. Then today I've been keeping myself busy with the Ford Capri console. I've kept a little bit back just as a filler job. So this morning, I want to say quickly, but it's not quickly, I did the rear parcel shelf. Really simple, bit of foam on there, just a bit of leather that will go behind the back seat. That's what you'll see when you look through the rear window. So that's a little piece there. It's just got 3 clips. Then I'm back on the door cards. Last time I spoke about the door cards, I said I cut them out and I started marking them up. I can't remember if I mentioned the little accent strip, and I think I did say, look, Plasma cut me these, so we're going to make these strips, which originally, we're keeping to the original theme of the car, and we quite like this sort of wavy line that's in the door cards. That is actually just a bit of plastic strip that they then covered with some sort of a shiny foil almost. I've pulled it off now because it was just flaking all over the show. But we're going to remake that from a billet strip, very similar to what you'll see in the Camaro door card. So it's going to be a billet strip, some M3 nuts that's turned into the back. James actually gave me that idea. I was going to turn nuts in and cut the heads off, and then he said, no, just use some grub screws. Worked a treat. Thanks, James. Anyway, so you can see me. I've put the grub screws in with a bit of Loctite, and then that effectively makes a pin. Stick them on the door card, and then simply a washer and a nut on lock nut, nylock for some of you call it that. Put that on. Worked a treat. Didn't pull any waves into the billet strip. Didn't because I made them pins, that's part of the strip effectively, and pushed it through, and then you tighten it with a nut from the back. You don't risk putting a bolt in from the back of the panel into the strip, and then because then what you risk is over tightening that nut, and then you can push a little bump on the strip, because we are literally talking 2-3 millimeters of material that we're working with these little billet strips that we're putting on. So they're very fragile. So take a deep breath slowly and don't over tighten it. I actually just use my hands. I put a glove on with the little extension on my socket extension, and I just hand tight those little nuts. I didn't use a socket or the T-bar or anything like that, just to have a little bit more control. Anyways, back to these. So that's how that's going to work. It's going to be the same. That's why you can see all the little dots. So that's going to go in there. One little challenge that I had is because we're going to put a bit of an accent the same as on the seat. So this perf bit's on the seats as well, as you guys know. We're going to introduce that on the door card here. And the moment I put that in there means there's seams over there, and it means I have to have a seam over here because this is not running all the way through. Anyway, it's not a big issue, all doable, but this needs to cover that seam line. So now I've got all these bolts that needs to go through there, which means I'm going to have to break the seam, which then by the time I'm putting tension on it this way and that way, all that will start pulling loose, and everybody knows when a seam starts going, it just goes. So what I've worked out is to give myself a better chance. So I'm going to, and Jamie's got some shots of this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the stitch length of the seam, which then will leave me with bigger gaps, which then will probably, if I hit 80%, I'll be happy, because now you can see there's one through there. I can pull that open and I can give that a tug, and the stitch is still holding because I went in between it. But if I go somewhere where I actually broke the seam, that's going to happen. So you can see how that one opens up and that one's holding it. Now, it's not the end of the world if I've got one or two, because a bit of super glue underneath, and remember, I am going to be pulling down on this with a bit of glue and then the billet strip, so that's fine. And then a little bit of reinforcing with maybe a little bit of super glue. That's never going to go anywhere because you don't sit on a door card. And these, they've got an armrest. It's not, there's no tension, so it's not, you cannot push here and then all of a sudden it creates pull and stress on the seam. So we can deal with it, but I don't want to be breaking each and every one of these. So I will let you know how that goes by the time I've done the first one and put those billet strips in. So fingers crossed that's going to work. So that's all cool. What I'm going to do now is the customer, another challenge on these actually is, which I didn't realize, is I ordered the clips, and there was, when at closer look, I picked a door card that wasn't damaged. I picked the best one and I used that as a template. Anyway, scratching in between the other stuff, looking for something else, I realized I picked the other door card up, whichever side it is, I think it's the right hand side. I realized, oh, hold on, the two front door cards has got two different types of clips in it. So that might have been, there's been a change over the years in the car, who knows. I don't think it's original. So we've asked the client to please bring both doors, and I need to test fit these cars before I trim them. And the reason is the one clip works, you drill a hole dead center and the clip lines up with the center of that hole. The other one is those offset clips. I will have to grab one, but I'm sure you guys know exactly what I need. Give me 1 second then.
A few moments later.
And I'm back. Right. So these are original Capri, but that, I don't know if Jamie's gonna get that. If you can get that, otherwise we'll do. So basically that one has got a little slot, and I cut a hole and you slide it in like that. There we go. I'll struggle to get that out in a minute, but you can see that that's offset from the hole, so that can cause a big problem. So if I simply just put these original clips in, which was in the door card that I use as my template, and then all of a sudden saw the other one, so the other one works straight dead center with the hole, very similar to this, but it's just a spring clip. Unfortunately, I don't have a sample of them because they were all rusted and gone to bits. So customer's going to bring the doors when he's ready. Then I will test fit these cars first. In the meantime, I'll make all the patterns. I can cut all the leather because the shape, the outside shape and the positioning of the seams and stuff won't change. But then we'll park it, dry fit it, and make sure all the clips lines up and everything's right, and then we'll trim them, just to save us that, because you can easily go into 2.5 days worth of work if you now need to strip that all back, and then then it doesn't look as nice because you can see it's reworked and so we're going to just avoid that. So that's on the Capri, and that's about it. So lots going on, but it's just going through the motions and making sure we cross the T's and dot the I's. Another thing, one last thing that I can mention is I received, if you want to come over here to the Man of War leather horse, right? This big bad boy here. We received this beautiful black classic Mercedes-Benz leather because this Saturday Nick is kind enough to come in and receive the car for me. I'm not available, unfortunately. This is a classic print Mercedes-Benz leather, and we've got an E320 W124 station wagon coming in for some work. So I'm really chuffed to let you know. Black leather, we've got some nice inserts, different insert houndstooth that the customer picked. So you'll see some seats going on there, some dashboard work, some door card work. Nice little car. Really looking forward to it, as that was one of the first cars that I started my apprenticeship on at the time. So yeah, really excited. And with that, I'll see you guys next week.
Well, thank you very much, Richard. And I'm going to sneak over here. Feels like the good old days of hyping up the Den launch party, doesn't it, wandering over here? But actually what I'm hyping up is the merchandise. So I mentioned earlier in the video, we now have retro power hoodies like the one I'm wearing, which are much thicker than the old range hoodies we used to have. Really, really heavy duty, lovely and warm. We got rid of the tassels that the guys in the workshop kept saying we need to get rid of those, because we pull them out anyway to avoid getting them tangled around moving parts. Then we've got Den hoodies in charcoal. We've got retro power t-shirts with the same logo in black only at the minute, but there will be more coming in the new year. Den t-shirts in black and white. We've got a few of these limited edition Lotus concept t-shirts we did a while ago. We've got retro power beanies. Still got quite a lot of these really nice retro power edition C key rings. So we did limited editions of various designs of these. A and B sold out pretty quickly. This is edition C, and one C's ones have gone. We'll be moving on to another one, so if you buy these, there's only ever going to be, I think it was like 80 or so of those. Den keyrings, all of these are made in the UK by Bruce Holder in leather with laser etching on the ring as well, so they're not just generic rings. We've got Den trucker caps, lanyards, mugs. There's Retro Power mugs, I haven't got any here. And there's also, as ever, Retro Power coffee, which was a blend we put together with Roundstone coffee. And there is now also the Den coffee, which is a slightly different blend that we've done. So yeah, essentially, get on the website, retropower.co.uk, go into the shop and get your merch in time for Christmas. And I'll see you next week.